Hey, good morning, y'all. Josh with Severe Weather. I hope you have a wonderful Wednesday. We are looking at a return to some wintry temperatures and winter weather across the central and eastern United States. Down south, it hasn't gotten to you yet, but just give it a few more days and it will be getting to you. I know here in the Carolinas, it is definitely a colder, windier day. As yesterday was nice and warm, but that is it. No more warm weather anytime soon over the next few weeks. I'm going to share my screen with you and show you what we're going to be talking about. First, we're going to talk about winter weather across the northern and eastern United States. And this originates out west, and I will mention the west as well, but a major snowstorm expected again for places that are seeing close to a record winter when it comes to snow in the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and even some snow coming for Chicago and Detroit, and then eventually into the eastern U.S. over the weekend with another storm on its heels for the first half of next week. We are going to see some break in the snow drought for some here in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast over the next couple of weeks here as this winter ends with a bang here. Right now, we do have several advisories and warnings up in the west and in the northern United States. We'll start out west where much of California is under a flash flood watch for a barrage of an atmospheric river, which is going to bring a lot of heavy rain into central and northern Cal over the next few days with heavy mountain snow expected. As that storm jumps into the plains over the Rocky Mountains, we see more snow expected from Montana to Wisconsin and Illinois. We now have winter storm watches that are in effect for northern Iowa, northern Illinois, southern and central Wisconsin, and southern and central Minnesota, and wet advisories back across the Dakotas, Nebraska, and into Montana. So more snow on the way here and a lot of rain as well across south central parts of the United States. Temperatures have taken a tumble. If you have not gone outside this morning in the mid-Atlantic and into the southeast, you'll notice it's quite a bit colder as temperatures have dropped over 30 degrees here in the central Appalachians and 20 degrees in the Carolinas. And it is still going to be a chillier day as well, with skies clearing out here over the Northeast and into the upper Midwest. But as we get to the next several days, we are going to see some moderation before another push of cold air comes. And with the wind, we get the wind chill, as wind chills are in the teens and 20s across much of the Northeast and into the Mid-Atlantic region, and 30s across the Tennessee Valley and the Carolinas. We are not yet participating, though, in this cold along the Gulf Coast, as it still feels pretty balmy here with temperatures in the 60s and low 70s. I mentioned the wind here. You can see wind gusts this morning are still exceeding 25 miles per hour across the southeast and the Tennessee Valley and all the way up to Iowa, and some brisk wind as well over the northeast, where wind gusts will remain in the 30 to 40 mile per hour range. Now, as the day wears on, we see these winds relaxing somewhat. It'll still be brisk over the northeast, but the Carolinas into the southeast will be seeing less wind, fortunately. So it'll just be a nice afternoon with some cooler temperatures. As we get later into the week, as our next storm moves through the Great Lakes, winds will start ramping back up here in the central and eastern parts of the country Friday into Saturday. And as our storm cranks up, it's going to cause some choppy seas and some gusty winds along the Outer Banks and along the Mid-Atlantic coastline over the weekend. With our next storm heading east, we see winds ramping up even more Monday into Tuesday along the East Coast. So as the cold enters here with our next wave into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, you have to beware of the Ides of March, because it'll definitely be colder and windier, and that cold and wind continues as we get to the second part of next week. So let's look at the shorter term. And you can see our next storm beginning to develop here over Iowa and Minnesota. We'll see snow breaking out later this morning around Des Moines, and then spreading north to the Twin Cities around lunchtime, with more rounds of rain and storms expanding eastward from North Texas and Oklahoma into parts of the deep south. We could see locally heavy rain here. The east will be pretty quiet today into tomorrow. We'll see some stuff around the coastline. And I say stuff, I mean just scattered showers near the Cape Cod region and scattered snow showers across Maine. But this next wave that is moving into the west today is going to reform into a stronger system here tomorrow in the middle of the day. And we'll see snow beginning to become more intense over the Dakotas and then spreading into northern Illinois. And we're expecting snow for the evening rush tomorrow around Chicago and Milwaukee, with a wintry mix south of this region, and then some heavier rain and storms over parts of the Mid-South into Texas as well. Not really looking at any kind of severe weather at this point, but we are going to see potentially some heavy amounts of rain with frequent lightning strikes from northeast Texas into northern Alabama here tomorrow night. This storm in the Midwest is going to spread east, and that will affect the eastern seaboard here on Friday. And it's going to be pretty much an ugly start to the upcoming weekend. Now, that's the first storm. Excuse me. The next storm batters the west here. An atmospheric river is going to bring two waves in, one into Oregon and Washington tomorrow night, the second into California here on Thursday morning, and very heavy rain affecting northern and central Cal. That spreads down the coast as we get into the afternoon hours, and very intense snow once again is going to create difficult travel across the mountain passes and continue to pile that snow up. And I'm going to talk about a little bit more about that storm track here. The European shows it, storm 1 and 2 here out west. And first storm moves across the Ohio River Valley, so it stays rain along the Ohio River here tomorrow night into Friday morning. Second storm spins off of the California and Oregon coastline, and that will eventually move on to the plains here next weekend, or this weekend. So storm 1, as it moves east into Pennsylvania, we can see a wintry mix possible here across central Maryland, northwestern Virginia, and eastern parts of West Virginia, but snow across the majority of Pennsylvania, except maybe around the Philly area on south and east, where we primarily are going to see rain. The GFS takes this low pressure and intensifies it quickly off the coast, so winds will ramp up, but it is moving out before we see significant snow around New York and Boston. Now, the next storm, as it moves south and east, is going to take a more southerly track, but then begin to come up the coast here early next week, and we will primarily be looking at heavy rain, it looks like, for I-95, but a little bit farther inland, the potential for significant snow once again over New York and central PA, and then spreading back into the mountains. We'll have accumulating snow all the way into the Smokies region, and then all the way up into Maine. And the European continues to hint at a major storm coming up the East Coast. This track is a little bit farther inland, though, and means primarily rain for the big cities while the snow spreads inland. Nonetheless, it's going to follow with a lot of wind and a lot of cold. And this is not going to be the only storm we see in mid-March. More storm tracks heading eastward here as our atmospheric river continues to send them right along every couple of days, right across the northern U.S. and then diving down into the mid-Atlantic region. The GFS, of course, is different than the European somewhat to some extent, but it continues to show a major storm here Thursday into Friday over the Great Lakes, moving into the northeast Friday night into Saturday morning. It tucks this low pressure system in a little closer to the coast. It may clip Long Island and southeast New England with heavier amounts of snow for a few hours here on Saturday, but that moves out to sea. The next storm on the GFS gets suppressed farther to the south and east. So the European draws us up the coast, whereas the GFS pushes it out to sea. There's still going to be some uncertainty into how this forms. So we may have a near miss for the East Coast, or we could have a major storm. So keep tuned here as we'll get you more updates later this week and over the weekend. I expect to see a little bit more agreement. Whether the GFS or the European is right, we don't really know at this point. But the European's been the most consistent. It's the one that I believe could play out. But again, we're not going to know for several more days. Nonetheless, next week will be the coldest in quite some time over the eastern United States, with additional storms showing up on the GFS and tracking across the Ohio Valley and Northeast. And the GFS continues to want to bring something down south into Northwest Texas and New Mexico later next week. But that is going to take a southern track and maybe something to keep an eye on in the mid-Atlantic for the following weekend. The national blend of models shows significant snow building in California and Oregon, and then a pretty big snowstorm here on Thursday and Friday across the upper Midwest with over a foot expected, followed by the next one Sunday into Monday, and that will be our heavy region of snow here. So much of Minnesota and Wisconsin will see an additional foot or more of snow. Same goes for the northern Dakotas. This does spread eastward, so you can see there is a potential for some snow in the Northeast. I'm going to zoom in so you all can see that here. And the blend of models does show a few inches spreading into Pennsylvania and New York here by Friday night. And then the next storm moving up on Tuesday will bring potentially significant bigger amounts over the mountains and into north central PA and central New York. This could include Philly, New York City, maybe even Baltimore and DC, depending on how things line up. But the trend next week is colder and snowier. So even if you don't get it from this end of the week and weekend storm, or if you don't even get it from Tuesday or Wednesday, you still have more chances to see snow here in the Northeast right on through the end of next week and even into the week of the 20th. So stay tuned on that. Back out across the West, no question about it, it's going to be very heavy snow over the mountains here with potentially 150 inches or more over the Sierra Nevada and right on up into the Cascades and the interior of the West. Denver's not going to see a lot out of this. Cheyenne may not see a lot out of it, but things will kind of skip across into the plains where we'll see 1 to 2 feet of snow over the next 10 days. We will see heavy rain, though, no question about that. California on the blend of models shows the potential over the next 10 days for up to 16 inches of fresh rain. And a lot of that's going to be in the frozen format, so not all of that's going to be rain. But even at the coast, around Santa Cruz, 8 inches of rain possible, 5 inches around the Southern Bay, 7 across Napa Valley, even farther up the West Coast, 2 to 3 inches across northwestern Oregon, right up the Willamette Valley into western Washington. So a very wet pattern ahead here as we see a barrage of storms coming in from the atmospheric river. Looking farther east, we will continue to see some heavy rain here, but it looks like next week is going to be our bigger potential problem for heavy rain, with 2 to 4 inches expected over Arkansas, northern Mississippi, northern Alabama, northwest Georgia, and the southern Tennessee. We see less across the Ohio Valley as that storm track is more off to your south. More rain, though, across northern and possibly central Florida, maybe even parts of South Florida could see a little bit more significant rain here as we head into next week as that storm track shifts farther to the south. Temperatures are going to remain warm across the Gulf Coast right through the weekend. Chillier here in the east for certain, but as we get into the beginning of next week, we see this warmth getting quickly wiped out. A strong front's going to move down through the Gulf Coast region on Monday, and that is going to bring much colder air with respect to average south and east. And looks like the cold intensifies as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, right around the 14th and 15th. It's going to be well below average across much of the eastern U.S. except for Maine. Eventually, that cold does spread north and east. With our block here, though, this trough here is going to be nice and intense. We are going to see freezing temperatures in the southeast all the way into northern Florida here next week. It does warm back up, though, across parts of the southwest and especially Texas. So if you're in Dallas and Houston, we only really get a couple of days of chill before it warms right back up. But notice that the cold still is hanging on for more than half of the country here by the end of next week. We'll look at the potential for severe weather. It's pretty low. We didn't really have any severe weather yesterday or last night, but a marginal risk around the Red River Valley today. That spreads east tomorrow into the lower Mississippi Valley, and then just a general risk for storms on Friday. We could see thunderstorms as well in California, maybe some isolated severe weather there as well. Here's a look at temperatures over the next several days. You can see chilly except on the Gulf Coast, and then it warms up a little bit here over the end of the weekend and into the beginning of next week, but then turning colder once again. And our front drops down Tuesday into Wednesday, and it's much cooler in Florida and on the Gulf Coast, and freezing temperatures all the way down through the Tennessee Valley and the Carolinas by Tuesday night of next week. And that cold continues to remain in place with no signs of warming anytime over the next 10 days. In the central U.S., you can see the warmth still in place over Texas, Louisiana, and that will be in place through the weekend, but then colder air drops south and east. You can start to see it here Monday into Tuesday, and much colder down in central Texas, 30s and 40s around Dallas here by Monday and Tuesday, warming up slowly as we get to the second half of the week. And by the 16th and 17th, we should be back near or slightly above average. And the West remains very cold with respect to average, but does warm up some as we get into early next week. And you can see some 60s, 70s, and low 80s back into Arizona by next Wednesday. Thank you all so much for your time today. Again, we see multiple storms from west to east. We see the cold coming, especially next week in the central and eastern U.S., all the way into the southeast. What we don't yet see is great agreement on what's going to happen in the northeast. That seems to be the place we've struggled the most with consistency in our models. That's the place where we've struggled the most with getting snow to happen on the I-95 corridor, but don't give up the faith just yet. There's still a few more weeks of this cold to go right on through the end of March, and somebody could be in for a surprise here over the next few weeks. If you could subscribe to my channel, I very much would appreciate that, and I'll have more updates for you coming throughout the rest of the week. Thank you all so much. I want to give all the glory to God for allowing me to do this. And I just did want to read you a quick passage, and that is from Luke 17, 22 to 25. Just a testament of my faith that Jesus said to his disciples, "The time is coming when you will long to see one of the days of the Son of Man, but you will not see it. People will tell you, there he is, or here he is. Do them. For the Son of Man in his day will be like the lightning, which flashes and lights up the sky from one end to the other. But first he must suffer many things and be rejected by this generation. If you are a person of faith, you're going to be suffering, no question about it. Many things. You'll be rejected by worldly desires, by people who do not believe. If you are not a believer, that is not a judgment on you. It's something that's happened since the beginning of time, where people were born with childlike faith, but then over time formed their own opinions, formed their own beliefs, and maybe they weren't in Jesus Christ. But I will tell you that Jesus has given his life so that I can have eternal life. He's done that for millions upon billions of folks across the world, and there's room for many others to accept this faith and to accept the fact that when your time on earth is gone, and it's not a very long time, I mean 80, 90 years for many folks, when your day is gone, where are you going to go after that? Are you going to be wiped off the planet, or are you going to be saved and eternally in heaven with God through his son, Jesus Christ? That's the choice I've chosen, and I encourage you to do the same. I'm happy to pray for you, any spoken or unspoken prayer requests. And since the Lord has called me to do this, I just ask if you could pray for me and keep me encouraged as well as I share not just my faith, but weather and safety and things that are important to everybody when it comes to the weather. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful day and look forward to talking to you again soon. God bless you.